Hello everybody, my name is Paul and welcome to today's lesson where you'll be learning on how to structure your sentences correctly. So after today's lessons, students will be able to understand the meaning of predicates and clauses. They will also be able to differentiate between simple, compound, complex and compound complex sentences. And with that, they are able to use the newly found knowledge of the four types of sentences and integrate them into their everyday life by using them in conversations and writing skills. So, before we jump right into our sentences, we must first understand what the basic core structure of our sentences. So basically, a sentence is comprised of our subject and predicate. So what are predicates? Predicates are phrases where there are verb plus description. So for instance, the apartment, this is a subject, is cozy, this is a predicate. Is a verb, where cozy is an adjective. So this entire thing is predicate because there's a verb and description. So note that over here it doesn't have to be adjective. It can be anything, a noun, a verb, an adverb, as long as describing the subject. So another interesting fact to understand here is that this entire sentences, the apartment is cozy, this entire sentence is considered as a clause, which is defined as a group of words that contains the subject and the verb. You see, subject is a verb. So this entire thing is a clause. So moving on here, besides making things complicated, a sentence can be very simple. It can just consist of the subject and the verb. For instance, he ran. Or you can even add another direct object right after the verb to further elaborate your story. So for instance, she assembled what? She assembled her workstation. So you can see here, she subject verb and the direct object. So after understanding what made up our everyday sentences, let's move on to our first sentence of the day, which is the simple sentence. It has one independent clause. So let us first ignore the fact of the independent. We know, recap, that clauses are a group of words that consist of the subject and also the verb. So right here, I like to read. This is a clause because like is a verb, I is a subject. Like to read. Side note, it is a predicate. So I like to read. Simple sentence. Honesty is the best policy. Subject, predicate. The next sentence that we want to learn today is a compound sentence. So this sentence has more than one independent clause and they are connected by conjunctions. Just imagine that there are two separate sentences, but you just want to combine it into one sentences. So what are independent clauses? Independent clauses are clauses, subject plus verb, recap, that can represent itself. So meaning that the entire clause has a meaning by just looking at it. So for instance here, I like to read and I also like to write. So let's first analyze this sentence. I like to read is an independent clause and it's a conjunction. I also like to write is an independent clause. So you can see here that I like to read and I also like to write is an independent clause because if let's take I like to read for instance. If you take away and I also like to write, you can still make up something with just I like to read. Same goes to I also like to write. If you take away I like to read and if I just say I also like to write, it makes sense. So these are known as independent clause. So let's move on to the next example. I drink green tea, but they drink coffee. Independent clause. Conjunction, independent clause. To fact check whether this clause is considered as independent, you can just do it by just covering the part of the sentence they want to take away. For instance, I drink green tea, makes sense. They drink coffee, still makes sense. So a very pro tip that you want to identify compound sentences is to just by identifying the conjunctions. As soon as you see a conjunction, you can already identify that this entire sentences are compound sentences. Now, our third sentence of the day, complex sentences, which consists of one, independent clause plus one or more new term, dependent clause. Dependent clauses are the direct opposite of independent clauses. Remember that just now we said independent clauses are clauses that can represent itself. Dependent clauses are clauses that cannot represent itself. Okay, let's learn through from the examples below, shall we? So I don't know what to do next. Independent clause, because without what to do next, it still makes sense. I don't know what to do next. It's a dependent clause because you have to be with I don't know what to do next. If you just say what to do next, it's like your sentence is just half hanging right there. It's not complete. So I know that this one might seem a little bit vague, but let's move on to the next one. This is much more clear. I am going home now because I have a curfew. I am going home now is an independent clause. Because I have curfew, it makes sense. But behind it, because I have curfew, without the front part, without I am going home now, because I have curfew, it seems that your sentence is is hanging upside down. It's like it's not complete yet. That's why it is considered as a dependent clause. So moving on to the next one, we also have when the cake is brown, remove it from the oven. Dependent clause, independent clause. So for the final sentence of today, we have compound complex sentences. Now these sentences consist of multiple independent clause with one or more dependent clause. So for instance, Geralt of Rivia was on the track of his daughter Ciri, but the wild hunt was creating problems on his journey, resulting in him taking desperate measures. So I know it's a very long sentences, but let us break this down one by one together, shall we? Okay, so for the first part, we have Geralt of Rivia was on the track of his daughter Ciri. So this seems like a complex sentence to me. So this is a dependent clause, but this is a conjunction. The wild hunt was creating problems on his journey. Now, remember, this one seems very familiar, doesn't it? This is our compound sentence. So you see, right here there's a dependent clause, but the conjunction, remember, conjunction is a very important identification in compound sentences. The wild hunt was creating problems on his journey. This is also a dependent clause because in this part, this entire thing is a compound sentences, resulting in him taking desperate measures. Now, this part should be the independent clause because it seems like it's actually trying to storytell the sentences right before it. So this entire thing is how we break it down. So on a side note, compound complex sentences are very common in university level students because these types of sentences are the most suitable ones to help portray your idea in a very academic way, in a very professional way. So you can see this in a lot of academic writing. So before we end the session for today, let us all do a really quick recap on what we have learned today. Today we have learned what are predicates, we are basically verb plus descriptions, what are clauses, which are basically a group of words with subject plus verb, and there can always be something else after the verb. And today we learned 4 types of sentences. One, simple sentences, very simple with just one independent clause. Compound sentences, which are basically the merging of 2 simple sentences, so you have more than one independent clause. Complex sentences, which are a little bit more complex because you have now independent clauses and also dependent clauses. And note to self, there are no conjunctions in complex sentences, unlike compound sentences. Now, the compound complex sentences are where things get really freaky and there's a lot of things going on with the sentences because right now you have a lot of multiple independent clauses with one or more dependent clauses. So, and note to self, compound complex sentences are mostly used in academic writing. So, thank you all for listening, and we will see you very soon in our next session. Bye bye!